In the heart of New York City, where towering skyscrapers and bustling streets mask the darkness lurking beneath, one name stands out as a chilling reminder of what happens when evil goes unchecked: Roy DeMeo. This is not just a story about crime. It's about how an entire system failed to stop a killer who operated in plain sight. While Henry Ford revolutionized the automobile industry with his assembly line, DeMeo did something far more sinister. He turned murder into a business, refining it with ruthless efficiency. His victims didn't just disappear. They were methodically dismembered, their remains scattered like discarded parts in a junkyard. Estimates place his death toll at nearly 200, though the true number may never be known. Unlike serial killers who strike in secret, DeMeo worked within the shadows of organized crime, protected by power, fear, and the failure of law enforcement to connect the dots. He was a monster hidden in plain sight, and for years, no one could bring him down. Born into a world where opportunity should have led him toward success, Roy DeMeo instead carved a path toward infamy. His mother had dreams of him becoming a doctor, a noble profession that could have saved lives rather than taken them. But fate had other plans. Growing up in Brooklyn, he was surrounded by influences that would shape his future in ways no one could predict. His family tree included powerful figures. One uncle was a top prosecutor, another a forensic scientist. Yet neither could steer him away from the dark side of the law. Instead of following in their footsteps, DeMeo took a different route, starting as a simple delivery boy before finding his way into a butcher's apprenticeship. It was here that he first learned the art of cutting flesh, a skill that would later serve him in ways no one could have imagined. By the late 1960s, he had already begun his descent into crime, trading in stolen goods and violent intimidation. What started as petty thuggery soon evolved into something far more dangerous: an insatiable hunger for power, control, and blood. DeMeo wanted more than just street-level crime. He craved legitimacy within the underworld, a seat at the table of the Mafia elite. That dream became reality when he received a call that would change everything: a summons to meet Nino Gaggi, a high-ranking Gambino crime family boss. The Gambinos were the most powerful of New York's 5 mafia families, and aligning himself with them meant DeMeo had finally reached the upper echelons of organized crime. Under Gaggi's guidance, DeMeo's operations expanded beyond mere extortion and loan sharking. He ventured into gambling rings, high-interest lending schemes, and theft rings that stretched across the city. But his ambitions didn't stop there. While some within the Gambino family frowned upon certain illicit ventures, DeMeo saw opportunity where others saw risk. He dove headfirst into the underground pornography trade, a decision that brought in massive profits despite resistance from more traditional mob leaders. With Gaggi's blessing, DeMeo built a crew of specialized criminals, each handpicked for their unique skills: Chris Rosenberg, Freddie Dannon, and the inseparable duo Joey Tester and Anthony Center. Together, they formed a tightly knit unit, loyal only to DeMeo, ready to carry out whatever orders he gave. In the eyes of his men, he wasn't just a boss. He was a father figure, a mentor, and a legend in the making. Tucked away on Flatlands Avenue in Brooklyn, the Gemini Lounge stood as an unassuming neighborhood dive bar, the kind of place where locals could grab a drink after work without drawing attention. But behind its worn-out doors, it served a far darker purpose. It was the nerve center of Roy DeMeo's criminal empire. Owned outright by DeMeo, the lounge provided the perfect cover for his operations, blending seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life while housing secrets that would make even the most hardened criminal shudder. Here, amidst the clinking glasses and low murmur of conversation, deals were struck, strategies plotted, and fates decided. It was more than just a hangout for DeMeo and his crew. It was their headquarters, their fortress, and their launching pad for chaos. For those who dared to cross DeMeo or threaten his growing empire, the Gemini Lounge was often the last place they ever saw alive. Roy DeMeo's criminal genius extended beyond violence and intimidation. He understood that true power came from controlling money, and he found his golden opportunity in the financial world. In 1972, he orchestrated a move that would cement his status as a mastermind of organized crime. He got himself elected to the board of directors of the Brooklyn Credit Union. On the surface, It was a respectable position, but in reality, it was a gateway to embezzlement and fraud on a grand scale. Officially, he had been placed there by Nino Gaggi to help launder money, but DeMeo saw a greater potential. He quickly began siphoning off funds, convincing other board members to follow suit, turning the credit union into a feeding ground for his greed. Within a short time, the institution was drained dry, collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. Yet, despite the scandal, DeMeo walked away scot-free. He and Gaggi had ensured they remained untouchable, leaving the authorities with little to no evidence linking them directly to the bank's downfall. It was a stunning display of audacity. DeMeo had infiltrated the financial system, exploited it for his own gain, and escaped unscathed. By 1973, Roy DeMeo had already built a reputation as a ruthless enforcer, but nothing prepared the world for the moment he crossed a new threshold, one from which there was no return. That year, Paul Rothenberg, one of DeMeo's closest associates, found himself under intense pressure after being arrested. Fearing that Rothenberg might crack under interrogation and expose their criminal operations, DeMeo made a cold, calculated decision. In July, he lured Rothenberg to a quiet part of town under the guise of a routine meeting. There, in the dead of night, DeMeo committed his first confirmed murder, executing Rothenberg without hesitation. The act changed something inside him. Killing was no longer just a tool of intimidation. It was power incarnate. He realized that fear was the ultimate currency, and he intended to spend it freely. With this newfound confidence, DeMeo doubled down on his criminal enterprises, expanding his grip on the lucrative world of car theft. His operation became a well-oiled machine, employing 17 to 20 thieves every night, stealing cars based on specific orders. These weren't random crimes. They were precise, strategic hits on luxury vehicles worth more for their parts than their function. Once stolen, the cars were stripped down in Canary's chop shops, IDs replaced, and sold off in pieces. But as DeMeo's wealth grew, so did his willingness to kill. The same hands that once cut meat now severed lives, and the same mind that had perfected the art of crime was now perfecting the art of murder. Andre Katz was a skilled car thief, deeply embedded in the same underworld that DeMeo ruled with an iron fist. But in 1975, Katz's arrest on drug charges sent shockwaves through the tightly knit criminal network. DeMeo, ever the pragmatist, feared that under pressure, Katz might talk, exposing not just their car theft ring, but also the deeper layers of their criminal enterprise. After consulting with Nino Gaggi, the order was clear. Katz had to go. DeMeo, always meticulous in his planning, orchestrated a brutal execution disguised as a routine meeting. Lured in by his partner, Katz was ambushed, bound, and dragged to the Pantry Pride meat market in Queens. There, in the eerie stillness of the early morning hours, DeMeo carried out the killing with chilling precision. But what happened next would become his horrifying signature. Inspired by his butcher's training, he methodically dismembered Katz's body, neatly wrapping the remains in garbage bags. Days later, sanitation workers stumbled upon the gruesome discovery: body parts hidden among the trash behind the market, including a severed thigh with a tattoo that ultimately led to Katz's identification. Yet despite the horror of what had transpired, the investigation faltered. Witnesses were scarce, and law enforcement showed little interest in solving the murder of a known criminal. For DeMeo, it was proof that he could operate with impunity, vanishing into the shadows while leaving behind only whispers of fear. With Katz's murder serving as a grim rehearsal, DeMeo refined his methods, turning disposal into an art form. Bodies were no longer just hidden, they were erased. The Fountain Avenue landfill in Brooklyn became his dumping ground of choice, a sprawling wasteland where trash from Queens and Brooklyn converged in a chaotic sea of refuse. Meat processing remnants were buried daily, covered swiftly by bulldozers, ensuring anything tossed there vanished without a trace. Victims were chopped into pieces, packed into heavy-duty bags, and dumped into the Atlantic, their final resting place the depths of the deep blue unknown. Over time, DeMeo's operation grew bolder, more efficient. The bodies piled up, but no one noticed. The victims were criminals, car thieves, and small-time hustlers, people the world would miss. Law enforcement barely investigated their disappearances, dismissing them as gangland casualties. Meanwhile, DeMeo thrived in the shadows, convinced that no one would ever find the truth buried beneath tons of garbage and miles of open water. Detective Joe Winling saw something the rest of the department refused to acknowledge. As he sifted through case files and spoke to informants, a disturbing pattern emerged. Car thieves were disappearing at an alarming rate, and none of them were ever found. He brought his concerns to his superiors, pleading for resources to investigate further. These aren't just missing persons, he argued. They're being killed, and someone is making sure we never find the bodies. But his warnings fell on deaf ears. Police departments across New York were in crisis. Budget cuts had crippled operations, morale was at an all-time low, and public trust in law enforcement had eroded. Winling wasn't alone in his suspicions. John Murphy, a fellow officer from the auto theft unit, shared his unease. Together, they began piecing together fragments of information, tips from street sources, reports of suspicious activity near junkyards, and records of missing persons linked to the car theft underworld. Their findings pointed to a single name, Roy DeMeo. But without hard evidence, their case remained nothing more than a theory. It wasn't until they connected with Kenny McCabe, an investigator from the Queens District Attorney's Office, that their efforts gained traction. McCabe had spent years monitoring the Mafia, tracking funerals, weddings, and every whisper of movement within the five families. When Winling and Murphy presented their findings, he recognized the connection immediately. DeMeo wasn't just a car thief. He was a killer operating under the protection of the Gambino family. Determined to uncover the truth, the trio formed an unofficial task force, working outside official channels to build a case against DeMeo. They knew they were up against a system that had failed to stop him for years, but they also understood that if they didn't act, more lives would be lost. By 1977, Roy DeMeo had achieved what few men in the underworld ever could. He was officially a made man, a fully initiated member of the Gambino crime family. Murders were no longer just acts of survival or retaliation. They had become business transactions. Behind the Gemini Lounge, victims were lured under false pretenses, business meetings, social gatherings, or promises of lucrative deals. Once inside, there was no escape. The process was always the same. The target would be shot in the head, wrapped in a towel to contain the mess, then stabbed in the heart by Chris Rosenberg to ensure immediate death. The body was left to drain for 45 minutes before being moved to the bathroom, where the real work began. Using the bathtub to catch the blood, DeMeo and his crew meticulously dismembered the corpse, placing each piece in heavy-duty garbage bags. Afterward, they would sit down, order pizza, and eat with blood-stained hands, treating the entire ordeal as nothing more than a routine job. This grotesque ritual became DeMeo's calling card, a way to instill fear and maintain control. Unlike traditional mob hits, which often left bodies behind as warnings, DeMeo ensured his victims disappeared entirely. No graves, no closure, just silence. And with every kill, his legend grew, cementing his place as one of the most feared assassins in organized crime history. DeMeo's paranoia reached a fever pitch after a disastrous deal with Cuban drug traffickers. One of his lieutenants, Chris Rosenberg, murdered 3 men during a botched cocaine transaction, triggering threats of war from the Cuban syndicate. To protect himself and appease the Cubans, DeMeo executed Rosenberg and staged his death as a suicide. But the incident left a lasting mark. Paranoia took root, fueling reckless decisions that would soon spiral out of control. It started with an innocent man, an 18-year-old vacuum cleaner salesman, canvassing neighborhoods in Massapequa, Long Island, trying to make a sale. Mistaking him for a Cuban hitman, DeMeo ordered his murder. Unlike his usual victims, this one wasn't a hardened criminal. He was a civilian, caught in the crossfire of DeMeo's unraveling sanity. News outlets dubbed the killer the Kobe Killer. Public scrutiny rose, and with it, the risk of federal intervention. The tide was turning. In 1980, customs officers uncovered hundreds of stolen luxury vehicles being prepared for export to Kuwait, linking the operation directly to DeMeo. Federal agencies mobilized. A new task force was formed, led by seasoned prosecutor Walter Mack and supported by Detective Joe Wendling. Then came the biggest break of all, an informant. Vito Arena, a former member of DeMeo's crew, walked into the U.S. Attorney's office with a shocking offer. He knew everything. His testimony revealed the full scope of DeMeo's killings. Authorities located Joe. Scornlease remained submerged at the bottom of a lake, encased in concrete. Armed with this evidence, law enforcement intensified their efforts. As the net tightened around DeMeo, the once untouchable killer found himself cornered. But on January 5th, 1982, DeMeo's fate was sealed, not by the law, but by the very family that had elevated him to power. His Cadillac was found abandoned at the Verna Boat Club in Brooklyn. Inside the trunk was DeMeo's lifeless body, execution-style shooting. The Gambino family had silenced him permanently. His death marked the end of a reign of terror, but it did not bring immediate closure. Posthumous investigations revealed damning evidence within the walls of the Gemini Lounge, blood traces in the pipes, remnants of countless victims. Despite his demise, DeMeo's legacy endured. His estimated death toll ranged between 150 and 200, though the true number would never be known. Families of the missing continue to search for answers, haunted by the knowledge that their loved ones have been reduced to mere statistics in a killer's ledger. Roy DeMeo's story is more than just a tale of a ruthless killer. It is a haunting reflection of systemic failures within law enforcement and the broader institutions designed to protect society. For years, the signs were there. Missing car thieves, suspicious disappearances, and whispers of a butcher who cut more than just meat. Yet, time and again, the opportunity to stop DeMeo slipped through the cracks. The consequences of these missed chances were devastating. But in the end, persistence prevailed. Through sheer determination and the courage of whistleblowers like Vito Arena, justice was finally served. If you want to dive deeper into the dark underbelly of the Mafia and uncover the untold stories of its most notorious figures, subscribe to Inside the Secret World of Mafia Titans. We explore the rise and fall of criminals who shaped history, the betrayals that changed the course of the underworld, and the heroes who fought to bring them down. Hit the subscribe button and join us as we uncover the truth behind the legends.